This just one verse is going to be fun. I have incredible confidence that I can link the first verse in the Enuma Elish, the very first creation story, to the very first verse in Genesis from the Bible. I'm also going to be pulling from the Tao Te Ching, the very first verses, plus I'm going to use something that is from the apocrypha, a non-canonical work called Second Esdras. And I'm going to grab pieces in each one of them, despite the fact that they're worded differently. And I'm going to read them all through first. We'll listen to them, and they're going to sound like, wow, those are very different. We'll talk through them, mirror them in the psyche, and show how they, when we shift the analogs off of them, they're all teaching the creation of the human being, the individual. Let's get into it. My name is Dan Paulson. Welcome to the channel. And I'm going to start with, I'll just read them through first to begin with, and then we'll go ahead and talk about them. From the Enuma Elish, from Tablet 1, at a time when even the glories above had yet to be named, and unuttered was the word for the world which lay beneath. It was then that the first being Apsu, who was their source, and the progenitor Tiamat, the mother who gave birth to all, intermingled their waters, producing neither field nor marsh. At a time when no divine beings had yet come into existence, there were no names to be spoken and no fates pronounced. Then from the Tao Te Ching, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The unnameable is the eternally real. Naming is the origin of all particular things. I want to bring in a second translation from the Tao from a different source. It's just a little bit different here. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The nameless is the beginning of heaven and earth. The named is the mother of 10,000 things. A Genesis. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning, the first day. This is from John in the New Testament, just to make sure we're finding this all over the place. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. 2 Esdras 6. He said to me, at the beginning of the circle of the earth, before the portals of the world were in place, and before the assembled winds blew, and before the rumblings of the thunder sounded, and before the flashes of lightning shone, and before the foundations of paradise were laid, and before the beautiful flowers were seen, and before the powers of movement were established, and before the innumerable host of the angels were gathered together, and before the heights of the air were lifted up, and before the measures of the firmaments were named, and before the footstool of Zion was established, and before the present years were reckoned, and before the imaginations of those who now sin were estranged, and before those who stored up treasures of faith were sealed, then I planned these things, and they were made through me alone, and not through another, just as the end shall come through me alone, and not through another. All right, how fun does that sound? How close did those sound to each other? There's a time I would read those and go, oh my God, what is this crazy stuff? I read them now and go, that's the same thing. It takes a while to see it, but you wire your brain into it, and at some point, okay, all right, let's get into it, and let me talk through it. Let's go back to Tablet 1 in the Enuma Elish. And earlier I said the first creation story. I mean it's not actually the first creation story. It's the earlier creation story that I have. Okay. At a time when even the glories above had yet to be named, what I'm going to suggest is that this material right here picks up as the guru, the sage. Whenever you're ready to say, I'm done, I want to rebirth. I want to turn inward. You stop looking outward and start looking inward using this material, and it is you. It is me. It is whoever is going on this path. At a time when even the glories above had yet to be named, that is about me. This is a time in my life when I'm first born. Brand new infant. Let's think about this for a second. Take triplets. Born in Australia. Separate them at birth. Raise one in the southern United States, one in India, and one in Saudi Arabia. They don't know of each other. They just grow up in their culture. What happens to them? They get together 20, 30 years later. They might even hate each other because of different views, because of different experiences, because of different beliefs. What happened? When we're first born, we have the potential to be anything. Think of it. Let's go to our God mode. Step back, look at the planet. You see a bunch of things emerging all around the planet, and people from these areas grow up in their culture, and they think their culture is right. I see something very tribal happening. There's a point where those who step outside of that realize, oh my gosh, I just came from my place. There's something bigger going on. There's a point in time in our life when we are first born where the potential for all of life can emerge before us. We have not yet been wired. We are not who and what we are. Not until we begin to grow and develop enough to have experiences that we're aware of, and we begin classifying them as good, bad, all those various emotional things we do that makes our life hurt or not hurt, that begins to happen. But before that happens, we are here. Okay, I'm going to read it in compliance now with the idea that it plays out in the psyche, and let's see what we have. At a time when even the glories above have yet to be named. This is us. At the time, the glories of our life, our experiences, we're so new that we don't have awareness. And unuttered was the world, the word for the world which lay beneath. Unuttered was the word for the world which lay beneath. The word is the creation. That is awareness. When awareness happens, when we decide something, when we understand, comprehend, put some sort of mentality to it, that is the word. We are creating, and unuttered was the word for the world which lay beneath. We did not comprehend what was going on yet on the planet. We didn't have the mentality yet. It was then that the first being Apsu, who was their source, and the progenitor Tiamat, the mother who gave birth to all, intermingled their waters, producing neither field nor marsh. We had not field nor marsh, up, down, split, the conscious, subconscious. We're not quite living life yet. At a time when no divine beings had come into existence. Divine beings are going to emerge in this teaching as things that in the beginning are not okay. The divine beings are going to be the characteristics that we take on before we're aware, when we're angry and we're acting out and we're ashamed and all those things. We don't have a hold of those things. Those are going to be called divine beings. And the reason they're called divine beings here is because they have so much power that they are going to overrun you and your life. And they're going to have to be wiped out later and replaced with men that don't have that kind of capacity. That's how they're doing it in the Babylonian creation myth, the Enuma Elish. There were no names to be spoken and no fates pronounced. We had not decided. I hate that. And so nothing is going to emerge yet as a result of it. There were no names to be spoken and no fates pronounced. We're this empty, yay, happy baby. Let's go on to the next one. Now, Lao Tzu is going to sound a lot different. The carrying case, the analogs are different. The entire packaging is different. The teaching still needs to be here. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. To me, the Tao at this point translates into the way your life is, the quality of your life, your overall life experience. The life experience that can be told is not the eternal life experience, the way your life flows. When we leave everything unjudged, everything's pretty open. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. Once we start naming things, and these are experiences, again, this is playing out in the psyche. This is us. The way of our life is eternal if we don't name it, if we don't classify things. Hate, love, joy, all that stuff. We need to step back from the emotional connection, and then life flows. The unnameable is the eternally real. When we don't classify things, everything, the potential for anything is always there. Once we start classifying and naming things, potential goes away, and those get fixed and locked into whatever we've judged them. Shame, pain, hurt, those are going to be cyclical experiences that we can't get out of because of what we have named. Naming is the origin of all particular things. That's our life. Naming our life experience is the origin of all of the things that we experience in life. Okay, and between that material, we started out in Babylonia with the Enuma Elish, and then that second one went to China. So we went from Babylonia to China approximately 500 to 1,000 years later. The teaching is still there, and it's being managed culturally in different packages. Let's move on to the next one. It's going to be Lao Tzu again. It's going to sound very similar. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. So far, we have got the same thing. The nameless is the beginning of heaven and earth. So, as long as you know things but don't classify them or qualify them, we begin to have self-aware experiences that are joyful. The named is the mother of 10,000 things. You see, that sounds a little bit different, but it's carrying the same package. It's we need to look at what it's doing conceptually in the mind. The named, what we do, what we say, what we experience, how we decide that is going to be, becomes the mother who provides that there's going to be offspring that continually comes from that experience right there. So when we have bad experiences, whenever we have experiences or things that it's a mental process. Everything. We're looking to be happy. When we're not happy, it is actually anything. It doesn't have to be 10,000 things. It's anything that prevents you from being happy. 10 billion things. 10 things. Okay, and I used two sources there, the Gia Fu Feng translation as well as the Stephen Mitchell translation. Chinese to English doesn't make it very well. So when you read between translations, you can see quite a bit of variation. So I like to average that one out a little bit better. We don't, the rest of it, we don't have those kind of options, but we work with what we have available. So, all right, let's take our adventure to the land of the Hebrews, a different time, a different place. Again, hundreds, sometimes thousands of years distance from these teachings. And certainly from where we are today looking back on it, it's a wonderful mystery, but it's fun. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning, the first day. This is our creation. This is a creation story. It is. It's meant, though, to be an analogous carrying case that is such that it has a level of believability to it. When we looked at the previous stuff, you read it and go, okay, yeah, you know that that's not supposed to be true. You read it and go, there's something in here. There's a mystery, there's a story, there's a mythology. It's going to be rich with parables and metaphors and things to try and figure out, analogous terminology. All of it is like that. You get to hear, and you know what? It sounds different. But it only sounds different. It's the same thing. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. What is God? There is creation. There's something here. I don't think we can identify God. I know that there are people who say, of course, God is the creative all there is, but that's not what shows up in the material unless you're looking at certain carrying cases. That goes. So creation is happening and darkness covered the face of the deep. That's very poetic and it's very beautiful and it's very verbose. But as I read it and do my best to assign it a value to my own life and my own existence in some point in time, how is this me? What I see here is that in the beginning I am there, and that I am so far a formless void in darkness. I don't have conscious and subconscious yet. I'm born. Remember when we're Well, we don't remember. We know that when we're first born, we're not even at that stage. It takes several years before we've learned enough to have enough experiences to even reach a point where we are that, the happy baby. And you know what? That's not a great term. If you ever hear me say something like that, just correct it. It's not we might be a happy baby. We're just not aware of it. If we can imagine in our own life, something similar to that point where you're saying, I'm laughing and having fun because grandma is tickling me, but I'm completely unaware of who grandma is, to the point that we see the door open and grandma comes in and we know who grandma is and we know she tickles us and makes us laugh. So we, run up there. There's a point where we're happy in both cases, but in one, we're not yet mentally aware of it. And in the other case, we become mentally aware of it. And this is describing that area up front where we're not, and then it leads into where we come into the second part, where we're now separated, or we have our conscious and our subconscious. The separation is there. And we have the potential now to become learned, hurt members of humanity. This is actually before creation, before 7-day creation, when Jesus says before to enter the kingdom of heaven within, to do so as a child. This is the place he's referring to right here. That'll emerge later. I'll just throw that out as additional material. What does that sound like in Taoism? The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. It's not very poetic, but it's true. Then God said, let there be light, and there was light. So what we have, and God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. So we're getting that separation of higher and lower. Those are analogous terms. God called the light day and the darkness he called night. We've got our upper and our lower selves, conscious and subconscious, developed, and there was evening and there was morning the first day. We are ready to go. We are in that state of existence where we are self-aware, we're happy, we're playing, we're giggling. We're not yet accumulating what hurts us. But it's actually more than just that. Remembering we become products of our environment. So it's not just what hurts you, it's beliefs, it's convictions, it's divisions. It's I don't like those people because I've been told and taught that they're enemy and they're bad, so I just believe that. All of those things that are a part of who and what we are, we live from those beliefs when we've just been told them, and we go, okay, without finding out for ourselves. That is how we come about in life. That is how we all emerge. That is how all these stories emerge. Let's take a look at John. The Word became flesh. The Word, that's naming, classifying, judging. I have something happen to me and I don't think anything of it and I'm okay. I have the same thing happen to me later and it makes me so mad. I can't get over it. Maybe it's for whatever reason, mentally, I handle it different, and it becomes something that emerges from me later on. Now, that's a very small example. What we're really talking about is looking at our life and seeing how we are acting out and what has built off of small beginnings and become a bigger life that we're now acting out in ways that sometimes we don't know how or why. You get done later and go, that wasn't even me. It doesn't seem like it, does it? That has not come about yet. We are still previous to that. The Word became flesh. Flesh is when things become real. When what you decide manifests. And what you have chosen manifests physically in life. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So God is the creation here. We can see that they're identifying the point where we decide, I'm ashamed. That's God right there. I love it. That's God right there. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. Yeah, God's making the choice about whether it's good or bad. It's coming into being for us in our life, in our existence. What is coming to being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. That one gets a little more obscure. We see in the beginning, though, where the decision, the Word of God, all of that, how they're using different analogs for sure, but it's not just that. They didn't just change analogs, they changed entire genre. Instead of it being a spiritual teaching or a mythological teaching, it is a religious teaching. All three different styles of stories carrying the same lessons. All right, let's look at this other style from 2nd Esdras. Let's talk about a couple of fun things here. He said to me at the beginning of the circle of the earth. There we have the earth. Everything is the beginning. Circle doesn't matter. One big us. That's us. We are the earth. Before the portals of the world were in place. I'm going to stop here for a second and suggest something that if we go to, let's just look at Lao Tzu very quickly right here. Tells you that naming is the origin of all particular things. And then what happens is we begin naming things. We begin in all of the teachings. Think of it in the Adam and Eve story. What happens after creation? Now there's 7 days of creation. We're going to be naming things. There's going to be cycles that come into play. There's some teachings that are happening there that come about later. We first start out in life to be this person, and then later we begin accumulating things. What this is doing right here is saying we start out to be this person, but before we start accumulating all these things. So this has a bunch of stuff in it that makes it sound longer, when in all actuality, if you put side-by-side comparisons, you would see that they're covering the same thing. This one is just sequencing that. Instead of saying first this happens, then that, it's saying first this happens before all of those other things. That's it. It's like saying I struggle to leave my past, and in a story you could say, oh, I loved this so much that I couldn't let it go. That would be analogous to having a hard time leaving your past behind. Another way to put it in the story would be to say I'm trying to escape this that's after me, and it keeps coming after me, and I have to separate myself from it. Both of those would be good ways of showing that I'm having a hard time leaving my past behind, even if they sound different. This is doing that, a similar thing. He said to me at the beginning of the circle of the earth, before the portals of the world were in place, before we became who and what we were going to become, and before the assembled winds blew, and before the rumblings of thunder sounded, and before the flashes of lightning shone, and before the foundations of paradise were laid, and before the beautiful flowers were seen, and before the powers of movement were established. Flowers, things emerge from their seeds, movements, powers, established, cycles, all of these are nested in here. And before the innumerable hosts of the angels were gathered together, these are all of the characteristics that you hold and become a part of you and what you are. And before the heights of the air were lifted up, before we became separated, before the measures of the firmaments were named, and before the footstool of Zion. Zion is a desirable place. Zion is going to be analogous to a structure, who and what we are, our beliefs, our values, our qualities about us that make our life good. That's what we want to get to. That's called to Zion. The footstool is starting up there. Was established, and before the present years were reckoned, before we grew up, and before the imaginations of those who now sin were estranged, and before those who stored up treasures of faith were sealed. This is before we're living our life and becoming the wrecks that we become. Then I planned these things, and they were made through me alone and not through another. Just as the end shall come through me alone and not through another. I made the choices. Life is unfolding because of that. It will only get rectified through me. That's difficult because you look at it and say, I didn't make those choices. When I got hurt, somebody did that to me. I was a little kid. What they're referring to is mental. The choices is how we hold it. What is the emotion? I'm ashamed of it. I'm hurt. I'm somehow something. We continue to hold that. That is what we're needing to go after. That is what we've chosen. We didn't choose for the event to happen. We're choosing the emotional state of the memory and of the experience. And of course you would say, well, of course I got hurt, for crying out loud. What would you expect me? The problem is this: holding it in us under those hurtful terms means it cycles continuously in those hurtful terms. That's why we go, oh, God, I have to let that person go. I have to forgive them, not for their benefit, but for mine. Anyway, I kind of went off there. But you can see through all of these teachings, they're starting right off. You're an empty shell. You're born. You can become anything. That's what I see here in all of these. These don't appear in all stories, but you can recognize them. Anyway, hope that was fun. Love one another, and I'll see you in the next video.